So now I'm going to talk about how the code does what I said it did, which is to create this object hierarchy, right? Where we have one corporate office object. He has an array list of 4 branch banking objects who each have an array list of 4 clients. So this is the pack that I gave you, and the story starts here in the driver. In the main, we're creating an array list of string objects called new clients, and we're adding these strings into it. Notice there's 16 of them, right? Each line here is corresponding with the information needed to create each client here, right? We got 4 times 4 is 16 clients, hence 16 unique username, passwords, first name, last names. Well, not unique last names, but everything else unique. Personal balance, business balance, right? All stored in as a string. Okay. Again, there are 100 ways to skin a cat. You could have done this in many different ways. This is just the way that I naturally kind of put together. So then we create that array list called new clients, fill it up with strings that represent all the information we need to create all the clients, pass that array list to the corporate office constructor. And then we go over here to the corporate office constructor, and his constructor takes in that array list of strings called client information. Right now that we're here, we create this array list of client objects. We have these local variables, right, that correspond with the variables that we need to create a client. Right, these are all the variables that we need to create a client. First name, last name, username, password, personal and business account balance. And then I have a for loop that iterates 4 times. Why? Because this is corresponding with the array list of branch banking clients that I want to add to the first branch banking object. And so I'm using this cool little string method called split. And what that does is it splits up a string, this one, using this as the delimiter, which means that this is split up into a separate string, this one's split into a separate string, this one, everything that's just separated by a space. All right, and you might be asking yourself, how does it split that up? It splits it up into an array. All right, so we store it here in this array called parts that can hold string objects, and this part sub 0 would correspond with Dan, the part sub 1 would correspond with Lee, and so on as we move our way down. These guys are all strings, right? Oh, and I didn't go over this. This means the array list. Whoa, where are we? Okay, the array list of strings that we're getting from the main, we are getting for the first iteration of this for loop, we're getting the first object in that array list, right? The Dan, this one, and then the next iteration we're getting the index of 1, so that's the second object, that's the Ted. Right, and then the next one we're getting red, and so on as we work our way down. And so this for loop is going to get the first 4, split them all up into, well, let's take the first example, Dan, and it's going to, let's see if I can bring this up here. Okay, there. It's going to put first name as equal to Dan, right, and then it's going to make L name equal to Lee, and so on and so forth. Notice here for personal balance, we need to use float.value of. What does that do? That typecasts this string into a float, right? So that we can go ahead and safely put it into this instance variable personal balance, which is type float. And then once we have all of that set up, well, then we have all the information that we need to create a client. So I go ahead and add to my array list of clients, and I add a new client, and I pass all that information in. Yeah, so then after this for loop iterates 4 times, this client list is going to have 4 elements inside of it, right? The first 4 clients, this client, that client, that client, and that client. And once I have all of those, then I go ahead and create a new branch banking object and give it the client list, which is a array list of 4 client objects. And then I add that to the branch list, which is our array list of branch banking objects. So after this first set of code here, we are going to have this part completed, right? We will have our corporate object, we will have our first branch banking object, and that branch banking object will have his 4 clients. And so how does that work? Well, when we're over here in branch banking, what does his constructor do? He takes in an array list of clients, and he's for eaches through each client in the array list, and he adds them to the client list, which is an array of clients. Right? So once this is completed, then we have, again, this portion of the diagram, right? And then what I do again is I do it again, right? But this time I do it with from I equals 4 to 7. So that would be this one down to here, right? And that after that's completed, I have this section completed, right? And then I go ahead and run it again, but this time with 8 to 12. So that's going to go from I equals 8 to I equals 11, and then I'm going to do it again with I equals 12 to I equals 15. And when that's all finished, and I will have 4 branch banking objects in the branch list, right? That's 1 added, that's 2 added, and that's 3 added, and that is the 4th one that's added. And by the end of all of that, we will have, where is it? We will have this diagram completed. Right? And what I did is I went ahead and tested it using the toString, and it works good. But then I went ahead and deleted the 2 strings on the branch banking class, the client class, and the corporate office class, because you guys should go ahead and code that. So you can just trust that all of this code works and creates a set of objects that looks like this diagram here.